Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Founders Craft Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gonzalez. And on today's show, we're going to talk about vision, culture, and what does it look like to implement that in your organization. My guest today is Todd Mullins, the senior pastor of Christ Fellowship in South Florida. And so we have a chance to sit down with Todd and hear a little bit about his heart for the church and what led to the vision and his journey into the senior pastor role. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how they developed core values and leadership values in their organization. So let's jump right in. Well, Todd, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how you, as a team leader, as a pastor, how you view vision and how that has empowered you guys to really attempt to do and even successfully fulfill some of the things you guys are doing now.
Right. People ask us all the time, could you ever believe that you would be doing what you're doing today as a church, ministering to tens of thousands of people every week and all the ministries? And I'm like, no, we had no idea. The church started in my parents' living room with 20 people. And then for about 7 years, we were in a school cafetorium, wow, which I don't even think is a real word. Cafetorium. What is that? It's a cafeteria in a middle school or a elementary school. And it stunk and it smelled like soured milk and peanut butter and jelly. But that was our church home for a while. But back in those days, we could not see what God had in store for these days. We didn't have a clear vision. We couldn't see then what God was going to do now. But it was in those early days that I believe God really began to lay the foundation of how do we get a vision for where we need to go? How do we begin to see what God has in store? That for us, being a pastor and church, we believe that God always has more in store for us to reach for. There's scriptures that we build our vision upon, that God wants to do exceedingly abundantly above anything we could ask or think according to his power. And so those scriptures and that truth begins to be the foundation for us, that no matter where we are today, God's always got something better ahead for us.
I love it. And so when you think about, you referenced Ephesians 3:20, I believe it was. When you think about the scriptures, what led you to forming the vision today? I mean, what is the vision of Christ Fellowship, if you were to summarize it, and how did that come to be?
How did that come? Okay, let me give you what it is right now, right?
Yeah.
Because your vision as an organization is constantly morphing and changing and stretching. It's stretching you, it's stretching your team. And right now, we believe that God is calling us as a church to lead a radical transformation over our region here in South Florida. Something that would be not just a little bit of change, a little bit of something getting better, but of communities being changed at the foundation, of marriages being restored and families being brought back together again, and divorce rates going down and crime rates going down in our region. And we're praying and believing that even in our schools, we would see bullying going down, and we would see a revival, as what we believe for kids' hearts being turned back to God. And we actually believe that can happen when a church is alive, and not just our church, but the church. And so at Christ Fellowship, we really are partnering with all the other churches in our community to see God do a fresh work in the hearts and lives of people. So much so that people across the nation are looking, going, what is going on in South Florida? That divorce rates are down and there's no kids in the foster care system. And that is the place I want to live. That is the place where businesses are flourishing. That's the place where they're implementing God principles and God standards in all across their community. And I want to move there and be a part of that community. We believe that that's what God's called us to do, because our faith in Jesus better make a difference in our world.
Right.
So our faith, although it is personal, it is not private. And it's going to flow out of my life, and it's going to change the way I treat the people at my work, the people at the grocery store. It's going to change the way I talk to my neighbors. It's going to change the way I give and serve in my community. And that kind of an alive faith will make a difference in a community. So that's our vision. There's different components to how we see that being worked out. But how did it come to be? I'll speak to my journey on vision, getting vision, because I haven't always been the senior pastor of our church. My dad was the founding pastor, started the church real small in the living room. I've been serving with him all along as the church grew and grew over the years, and now we've got multiple campuses across South and Mid Florida. But I really believe that vision is one of the leading distinctions of a leader, one of the leading responsibilities of a leader. The difference between leadership and management, I believe, is vision. Management, when you think about it, is planning and analysis and problem solving.
Right.
But leadership is all about values and vision.
Yeah.
And if I, as the leader, don't speak to the values and the vision of the organization, who's going to speak to it, right? So we've got it. We have to give ourselves to that. And so, again, I think about leadership is about change, and it's about envisioning the change of where a people need to go, of where an organization needs to go. And so I had to, when I stepped into this role, give a lot of time to that, because that had not been my role up to this point.
Right.
My dad was the senior leader. He cast the vision. My job as the executive pastor of the church was to interpret the vision, organize teams and strategies to fulfill the vision. But it wasn't my job to get a vision or have a vision, really. And so when I stepped into the senior, right before I was stepping into the senior role, my dad looked at me and said, "Well, Todd, you got a vision for the church?" I'm like, "No." I forgot I was supposed to do that. Never did that before. Didn't know I was, So I spent about a good 6 months, really in prayer, seeking God, getting a vision before I could share a vision. I think it's important that a leader has a vision before you try to cast a vision. Yeah. And got a life coach that worked with me to kind of pull some things out of me that I didn't even know were down deep inside of my heart and mind of what I wanted to see happen with my life and the team that I was going to lead and the church that I was going to lead. And it was about a 6-month process of really spending time, for me, a very spiritual experience. I really had to turn to the Word of God and to prayer and seeking the heart of God of what He wanted for His church, because I wanted it to be not the plans of Todd, but the plans of God.
Right.
I wanted big difference. I get those confused sometimes, for me, it was really a journey of about 6 months of really beginning to embark on what it looks like to get a vision and allow the Lord to speak into my heart of what it could be. And so that became the foundation. And I just, again, had to keep stretching myself to dream bigger and think bigger and believe bigger. And as a leader, especially I was a newer leader, so I'd been leading in the church, but not in the role that I was stepping into. Yeah. I had to get around other big vision leaders. And as I got around some of these other leaders of industry, of business, and I heard what they were doing and how they were growing their companies, or I got around other churches that were just doing phenomenal things across the planet, it just stretched me to believe bigger, dream bigger, think bigger. Because if you've never been around somebody who's thinking of, we can reach all of Africa for Jesus, or we can reach, our whole state. We're going to have churches in every city, or we're going to do this. We're going to, franchise our model out, and we're going to be able to transform. If you're not around people that talk that way and think that way, you have a tendency not to think that way. And so I had to expose myself to some big dreamers to really get myself dreaming big at the beginning of this journey.
And that's so important, because you think about, I can even think of my own walk. You come up with your own plans, right? And then you try to ask the Lord to come into that plan and say, "Lord, bless this plan." But the reality of it is He has a plan, He has a vision, and He wants us to become a part of that.
Right.
And so it sounds like that was definitely a part of, your journey developing that vision. So you take some time, and you take about 6 months, you mentioned, and you're surrounding yourself with what is possible. You're kind of writing down what is that vision, right? And you're taking some time in prayer. At what point did the vision become a reality? Like, how did you then when you stepped into that senior role, basically cast that vision to your team? What was that like? And what was your process behind that?
In my office, I have a little whiteboard tucked behind my office door. And so I would just, during that season of 6 months, whenever I felt there was some dream or just a part of a dream, maybe I didn't see the full picture, but I had a piece of the puzzle, I would write that down on this board. And so this board was just cluttered with cities' names where I believed we were supposed to go, ideas for ministry opportunities, ideas to expand our ministry, to make it more effective. And so as I would look at that wall, that became what I would pray and think over throughout the days. And when things seemed to not make sense or get a little, I'd erase that one or change it or develop it, build it out. And then I began to share what God was doing in my heart, the dream that was beginning to stir inside of me. Man, I shared it with my dad. I shared it with my some of my mentors. Of course, I shared it with my wife as we were praying through these things together. And then as they began to take root, I began to share them with my team. So I have a team of about 8 or 9 men and women around my wife and I as we lead the church. Yeah. And they're like our inner circle, our leaders that are helping us develop everything we're doing, our core team. And I just found myself taking the time to share the vision, cast the vision. And as I talked about it more, I found I got more excited about it.
Yeah.
I got more familiar with it. It began to take deeper root in me. It began to more easily flow off my mouth. And then I began to share it with some of our, the leaders, the volunteer leaders, or just people that are maybe giving leaders in our church, the ones that would really have to buy into this vision. I began to share it with them and bounce it off them, and lunches and spending the afternoon together, playing golf or something. We talk about it. And I would intentionally make room in the conversation where this was taking up a lot of the time of the conversation so that I would get comfortable with it.
Right.
Again, I think a lot of times as new leaders, you step into a new season and you've never done what you're asked to do,
right?
What you're being asked to do. And so you've got to get comfortable with it, or it's going to feel awkward. It's going to not feel natural. And so I found myself every chance I had talking about it in hallways, talking about vision in meetings. I had to become a visionary leader. In fact, one of the things my life coach did the first time, my dad is such a strong visionary leader. And so he would say, well, Todd, do you see yourself as a visionary leader? I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe I could get a vision. I'm sure I can. Where by the time I was done with him, he had me, almost chanting, I am the greatest visionary leader in the world. And I actually believed it. I mean, He had me so convincing myself, and I knew it wasn't me, it was God's vision and all that, but I had to raise my game a little bit of, okay, I'm stepping into this role. I got to step up, put on my big boy pants. I got to lead this thing, and I got to get a word. I got to get a vision. I got to get to, maybe not all the strategy and the plan.
Sure.
But that I had to really change my mindset. So I think the first step was really just changing me and getting me ready to step out of my comfort zone and be something I hadn't been before.
Right.
And then talked it up with my team. And then we began to talk it up with our, we have several thousand in our church that are just our kind of our heart and soul of our church. They're like our volunteers and leaders in different ministries that just volunteer and serve in the church, shared it with them. Then by the time I actually began to share the vision with the church at large on the weekend, well, I've been talking about it now for, months to people. And so it was like, to me, it was already done.
Yeah. I'm
like, we're going to take over this world for Jesus. We're going to do, what God's called us to do. We're going to care for the poor. We're going to go to this city that's desperate, and we're going to step a ministry center right in the heart. And so in my mind, it had already happened. In my mind, I had already seen the transformation taking place in these families and in these kids in this town of Belle Glade where we were going to go. So I believe that because I spent so much time starting with the inside, it actually was able to be more contagious as it flowed out.
I love it. And you mentioned something where the more you spoke about the vision, the more real it became to you, the more comfortable you became with it. And it's part of vision casting from, many people who talk about it say it's important to cast the vision in a present state, as if this is already taking place, and I'm just showing you what I see.
Yeah,
getting people excited about that. So I see that's definitely something you did along the way. Now, as you were casting that vision, especially to maybe those who have maybe worked alongside of you, saw you develop as an individual into a leader, did you ever find that there was pushback, or that maybe people felt like, I don't know if we should do that. That's too bold. It's too ambitious. I mean, did you ever run into any sort of conflicts in that area?
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
If you don't run into that type of conflict, you're probably not dreaming big enough. If you are going to dream some big, audacious dreams and do some radical things for God, you are going to raise up some people that are going to tilt their head and go, really? You think you can do that? You really think we can do that? And so if you're not getting that from your team or from some, stockholders or whatever in your business you might be a part of, you probably need to stretch your vision a little bigger. And so, yes, we got that along the way. I have people that there's people that would maybe hesitate in things that I listen to. And then there's other people that I'm not going to listen to. They're maybe not weighing in a place that they're not supposed to be speaking into the vision. There's others that I surround myself with that I want to be wise. So there's wisdom in godly counsel. And so if those people, my dad, my mentor, my wife, some of our key leaders, if they paused, I wanted to know what was behind the pause. Am I not being clear enough with the vision? Of course, in our line of work, faith plays a big role in what we believe God's calling us to do. That if it's not, I want our vision to be so big that if God doesn't show up, we're going to fail, right? So where we are is maybe a little bit different than maybe how a business guy might do it, but I am always stretching us to go farther. But with some of those people that needed more, sometimes it was me clarifying the vision, or me maybe understanding their concern was more pace of vision. That if I'm executing these 8 things all at one time, it's going to strap the organization. Okay, I received that. Let me go back and prioritize it, so that we can hit these in a priority that, and then that usually would solve it. But there's wisdom when you listen to the wise people God puts around you. There's wisdom when you have godly counsel. So keep yourself open to that for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing for many leaders, especially entrepreneurs. Let's say they have a business idea and they're excited about it. They've been talking to their significant other about it, or their colleagues, and they're all excited about it. But for whatever reason, when they go maybe to raise capital or to go launch the business, that's where they hit most of the friction. And maybe they quit their day job and pursue this vision full time, to then find out it's not taking off as fast as they wanted. What could you say to maybe an entrepreneur who is dreaming big and they've casted the vision, but it's not taking off as fast as they wanted?
We went through that. Again, as I said earlier, our church was small for many, many years, stuck in that school cafetorium. And it wasn't because of lack of vision back then. It was timing. It wasn't, we didn't have the right people. There were some other things God maybe wanted to do along our journey. But one of the core principles that we learned back then was to be faithful in the small things. If you're faithful with what you've given, what you've been given, God will trust you with more. If you're faithful with your now, God will get you there. So wherever you are with the people that God's given you, let's be faithful with those people. With the whatever God's put in your hand for the season, be faithful in that season. And there's a principle that Jesus even said, whoever can be trusted with little will be trusted with much more. But whoever is dishonest or can't be trusted with little won't be trusted with more. So many times leaders have a tendency, I did as well, to think, oh, well, when we get to this level, or when we do this, or when we're this kind of a church or organization, then I'll be able to work harder or give more time to it, or it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
What if the small was worth it? What if in the small, and the focus of being faithful with just a few actually gets you prepared to handle more? What if God he's a good father. He's a trustworthy God. He's not going to trust you with more if he finds you untrustworthy with a few, right? It doesn't make sense. I'm not going to give somebody more responsibility if they're not faithful with the little bit of responsibility that they've had.
Exactly.
So God is even wiser than Todd. And so he's only going to trust me. So that being faithful with the small thing, I would just encourage him, be faithful with where you are, give the best you can. And back when we were a small church, man, you would have thought we were preparing for 4,000 people on the weekend when we had, 100 people. We were like practicing and rehearsing all the music and the light, all the parts of it. We were really as diligent then as we are today. And I think God just was waiting to see, are you going to be faithful with that little bit? And if you are, I'll trust you with a little bit more, and then a little bit more. So
I love that. And towards the beginning of our conversation, you'd mentioned how vision evolves. It's constantly changing. And then you describe your present state. At what point do you constantly reevaluate? I mean, do you constantly reevaluate your vision? And if so, is there a cadence to that, or is it just based on resistance, or prayer? How do you navigate that?
I feel like I do a real hard look at our vision every couple of years. So I'm not always trying to change up the vision and mix things up and cause confusion in the organization. I want to keep pointing forward and moving us forward. But maybe clarifying the vision, that happens every year. So at the beginning of every ministry season, which for us happens twice a year, at the beginning of January and then in the school season at the fall, those are times where I get to re-articulate vision. I get to clarify vision for our team and for the church as a whole. I get to re-articulate where we're going and what we're doing. And as a leader, that's my time to really the months before that, to be digging into going, where, God, do you want us to go? What do you have for us to do? What could we be dreaming that we're not doing? If something has been meeting resistance, I have to go, well, is it time to put some more resource towards that, or to push pause on that a little bit? Maybe I was wrong, because you're going to get it wrong sometimes, man. If you don't fail, you're not trying, right? Failure is not optional. It's inevitable. And if a leader is so resistant to failure or fear of failure, they won't ever step out and try some new things. And that was probably my problem for a while, because kind of a recovering perfectionist. I don't like to fail at anything. That's why I don't play golf that much, because I can't get good at it. But if you're leading, there's going to be times you step out and try some big things and it fails. And I really had to teach myself so I could teach our team the fact that failure is our friend. And we can learn sometimes more from our failures than our successes. Sometimes our successes are not even because of us, It's just good timing. We had the right friends. We had the right momentum. We had the right influences at the moment. There's more to it than that, obviously, for all of us. But failure, man, when you fail, you stop and you think and you wrestle with, why did this not go the way I thought it would go? Right. And in those times of when we as a team have learned some of our greatest lessons about ourselves, about our organization, about systems that aren't developed to move the mission forward, and then we can go in and build those systems, and it directly influences some next steps we take in the coming days.
I love it. And it's almost like failure developed your capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so every time you step out and maybe you hit a wall or a barrier and you find, why am I stuck here? As you said, it causes you to really look at that. I like that.
I had to challenge myself that the vision needed to be big, right? Sometimes we don't want to take that. We don't want to speak the big vision out there because we're afraid, what if it doesn't happen? Right. What if we don't get there? But the truth is, big vision attracts big people. Large vision attracts people that are attracted to large vision in their lives. People that get up and go and make things happen. Those are the kind of people you want on your team, that you want in your organization. But those people are attracted to big vision. And I learned this from my father. Back when we were a very small church, we didn't have thousands and thousands of people gather on the weekends like we do now. At that time, he still had the big vision, as if we were doing all this big work in our community. And I remember one Sunday he stood up and said, we've got kids in our community that don't have homes to go into, and we're going to open up the best children's home in the whole nation. And we didn't know what we were doing. He's just saying this from the sermon platform. And I'm taking notes because I'm going, oh gosh, now I got to figure out how we're going to do that. But today, 10, 15 years later, that organization, Place of Hope Children's Home, is one of the largest children's care facilities in the entire nation of the United States. It has won the Charity Navigator's #1 teen service and care award for the last 3 years. It is doing remarkable things in our community, but it started with a vision of what we could do as a church. And that vision attracted big vision people to it. When he said that, there were people that just, something stirred inside of them. They want to be big vision. People want to be a part of big vision. And in fact, I was with some of our giving leaders here at our church that really just, they love what God's doing here. They're a part of it. And I was going around the table going, hey, what do you like most about our church? And many of them said, I just love that we're always being stretched, that the vision is always stretching us out of our comfort zone. It's always calling us to more, that we're never, one guy said, it's almost like there's this discontentment of where we've been. And God's doing some great things, but a holy discontentment. I mean, I know we got to be contented in our soul, but discontented with, man, we can do more. God, you can use us in a bigger way. And that constant stretching, I believe it stretches you as a leader and it stretches your team. If you are comfortable with where you are as an organization, you're never going to reach your potential. Because potential only comes when you're stretched beyond what you think is your capacity, but it's not. You can keep going. You can keep stretching. It's like going to the gym. I can go 5 more pounds. I can go 10 more pounds, heavier on those weights, and it stretches your capacity. And so as a leader, I believe it's our job to envision big, dream big. And when I'm dreaming big and I'm going, okay, this is pretty big, I have to remind myself that my vision for myself will never be bigger than God's vision for me or for our church. So God, you've got even something bigger out there. There's another verse of scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9 that says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can even comprehend what God has in store for those who love them. And so I'm like, well, God, I love you. So I'm believing you got all that in store for me and for our church. So I want to dream big, and I want to believe big. And as you do, as a leader, it will draw people to you and to that big vision that'll help you accomplish what God's put in your heart.
That's a very good point, because if you think about even in a startup or a small business, right? If the leader is only thinking about what he or she could physically accomplish with their own power, they're not going to attract the personnel, the team that's really going to help them get to where they really should be. And I believe also as a Christ follower that God gives us a vision that requires us to depend on him, right?
Yes.
And we can't do it without him. So there's obviously going to be this place where we're going to realize, okay, let me just start casting this vision and being obedient to what you've placed in my heart so that you can then bring the right people into my life. Now, when you think about it on the flip side, many people, let's say they've stepped out, they've casted big vision, they've tried their best to steward what's in their hands, but they feel jaded. In other words, they're just burned out and they feel like, well, I've tried and I was positive and I prayed and I did all of those things, but I still feel stuck. What do you say to someone who wants to just maintain and maybe has lost the spark of that vision they once had? How can they maybe find ways to renew that or be inspired to keep striving?
That's good. Well, when I've gotten to places personally where I felt maybe weary a little bit of just maybe always casting vision or something that failed that I cast vision for, I surround myself with a couple people that can speak into what do I need to learn from this? Because if I just focus on what I think I can learn, I may not get the full lesson. But if I have a few trustworthy advisors around me that I could say, hey, this is what I went through. This didn't quite work the way I planned. Could you help me figure out what do I need to take away from this? Because what I don't want to take away from it is discouragement. What I don't want to take away from it is a desire to give up or not try again or a fear. That's not what I want to pick up. But there are things I do need to pick up when I walk through that rough place. And what lessons in my own leadership? Where wasn't I clear enough? Where wasn't the organization ready? Where did I choose the wrong maybe leader for that assignment? And why did I do that? What did I see in them that I thought was going to work and it didn't? So I pick up what I need to, and then I give myself a time to grieve and go, okay, this isn't going to, this dream died or this vision didn't work out the way I thought it would. We invested a lot of time and energy and money there. That doesn't define me. That doesn't define our organization. Doesn't define what we're doing. It is a piece of our journey, and it's an important piece that we're going to learn from. But I'm not going to let it hold me back there. I'm not going to stay stuck there. I'm going to grieve it. I'm going to learn from it, and then I'm going to pick up and I'm going to move on. And again, the way I have done that is I've surrounded myself. I go get with other business leaders and church leaders that have vision that's so much bigger than me, and I just hang out with them. If they're speaking at a conference, I go to that conference, I buy them a cup of coffee, I'll buy them dinner, I'll carry their bags, whatever I got to do to get close to them. So some of what's on them rubs off on me, and it inspires me again. And so we've got to continually put ourselves in places where we're inspired. I think as leaders, we're constantly called upon to inspire other people, to bring life to the organization, to bring life to a meeting, to bring, everything we step into, it seems like we got to bring life to it. We got to make sure we're getting in places where people are breathing life into us, speaking into us, so that we are able to pour out again. And of course, then as a Christ follower, that we're spending that time in prayer so that we are refreshed by the Spirit of God to be able to pour into those that we lead as well.
That's good. And it's it makes you think that many people sometimes think that they only have one dream, one vision, and if it failed, that's it. And they kind of walk kind of this and they just really give up on everything. But I love what you said, surrounding yourself with people who are also dreaming, who are maybe a step ahead or are able to kind of come back and encourage you along the way not to give up.
I think it was Edison who failed at making the light bulb, I don't know, 1,000 times. Someone said, but if you asked him, he would not say he failed. He said, I learned 1,000 ways not to make the light bulb. And so I'm sure he was discouraged after, 100 times of failure or 200, but aren't we all thankful that he didn't stop?
I mean, otherwise we would be sitting in the dark now.
That's right. And there's other people that are waiting on you to determine what God's got in you to give to the world, to make a difference with your life. And so you got to keep trying.
That's it. Well, Todd, thanks for taking this time out of your day to just talk about vision. Again, I believe that everyone who is listening to this podcast was encouraged by just the passion that comes off of you, just in this room, and the things that you were doing at Christ Fellowship, and really for the community of South Florida, and which has reach to the rest of the world. So, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.